welcome. I just wanted to see if this was on. I see it is 3 o'clock, so I want to try and stick to time if I can. I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to come in, if somebody wants to just invite them in or not, but I think we must start and then try and finish by 4 and have some time for some questions if you'd like. I'll just wait and see if there are any straddlers that want to come in. Okay, I think we're good to go. I want to welcome you, those that have come. I'm hoping this is going to be a blessing for you again. What we're trying to do in these talks is to give us practical tools to help us develop the kind of health that God needs us to have, to be His people at the time of the end. So for me, it's so powerful that there's actually science to back these things that we've been preaching and teaching. And that's the point of these talks, that we collectively learn together and can make some empowered decisions together. So before we start, I'd like to pray. I don't think anybody else is coming. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, thank you so much that we can spend some time together this afternoon as your family. We want to praise you as our Creator for the power that you've put inside our bodies and minds. You are truly incredible. You are the mastermind of the universe. And I pray that you'd help us to gain further insight into how we work and how best to get the best out of us so that we can serve you with power and strength. We pray for your leading and guidance in Jesus' name. Amen. Right, so last time, do you remember what we spoke about? The brain, yeah? Yeah, we did. It was a sort of an overview, introductory type talk as to what happens when the brain goes wrong and some of the things that can cause that. But today we're going to take a look into one of the most important systems that you can possibly consider when it comes to your overall health. So it might be apparent to some of you what the sieve through which you live is, but it'll become apparent if it's not. So let's have a look. The sieve through which you live, food on your mind. So I shared this verse the last time. I've been studying physiology and anatomy for ages, and no matter what I study, I'm just amazed by the creative power of God. When you study physiology, when you study how your body works, when you study how the mind works, you cannot be but humbled. And the genius that's been put into your physiology is very humbling. And so I would encourage you to become a student of physiology and anatomy and science, because there's a mastermind behind it. You and I could never have come up with the complexity of this system. And our task is to try and understand better how it works and how to keep it in harmony so that we can fulfill His commission in us. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been His counselor? For from Him and through Him and to Him are all things. So in summary, we're looking at factors that affect our physical health, our physical bodily health, our brain health as a consequence, because the brain and body are intimately connected, and as a result of that interaction, the health of our mind. Our mind is a product of what's going on in our brain, which is a product of what's going on in our body. This is a profound truth, and we can't get away from it. So health is not the goal of life. When you become passionate about health ministry, sometimes you can almost make it like health is the goal of life, but it's not. Health is a resource for life. And if you don't have your health, you can't do what life is about. My dad had a thing next to his bed. Maybe he's listening, I don't know. He said that when we are young, we spend our health in search of wealth, so that when we are old, we spend our wealth in search of health. And we need to turn that around so that we keep our best energies for doing what's most important. We don't expend our energies wasting our health. Our brains and our minds are our organs of influence. They affect the impact we have on the world and on these work through us. So if you want to succeed in life, if you don't have health, you're going to struggle. Succeed in all that matters. So we live in a toxic world where Despite the advances in science and technology, the number of things that threaten our health has grown exponentially. And sometimes the very things that are supposedly for our improvement or progress are the very things that add to the challenge. Have you noticed that? We live in a very technologically advanced society, but some of these things that are supposedly for our development and good are actually working against us, and we need to know which they are and how to make them work for us. So what are some of the modern-day life threats to health? Stress, overload, busyness. I believe that human beings, I'm sure I'm not the only one, we are busier than we were ever meant to be. Do you ever feel that way? If you think about what the average human has to get through in a week, at this time in Earth's history, it's unrealistic. Like, I start on a Sunday with the very best intentions. I plan my week, and I write on my calendar what I got to do, and the calendar is full. And it's just not how it's supposed to be. We need to be intentional, and I'll say it again and again, we need to be intentional about carving out time for rest and relaxation and recreation. So stress, overload, busyness, and pressure, highly processed, refined, calorically dense, low nutrient diets. If you combine the kind of strain that the average brain is under with a calorically dense, nutrient-poor diet, you're in a recipe for disaster. Disrupted sleep. If you don't sleep properly, your brain is dying. Your brain is not regenerating and repairing. Lack of exercise, toxins in foods and water, entertainment industry. I want to challenge you. I know it's an old drum that people beat on. Think about what you do for recreation. There are things that are helpful, and there are things that are not innocuous, even though we think they are. Entertainment is not what we need. Recreation is what we need. We don't need entertainment. So this is an important concept to understand. The goal, if you want to be a good practitioner, someone that's sharing health with people, you need to be able to give people tools to improve their health span. Have you heard the term health span? So you've got a lifespan, but what proportion of that lifespan is made up of good, productive years that are healthy? That's the question you need to ask. And with today's modern lifestyle burdens, many people are having a shorter and shorter lifespan and health span. Their health span's dramatically decreased. The question you're asking is, how many productive years are coming out of the life that God has given me? Healthy, productive, abundant years. That's health span. And medicine is now fortunately in a place where we understand many of the factors that are impacting the health span. And so we need to become smart on what those factors are to try and increase our productive years. You see, there's a massive difference there in those two lines. That's schematically what's happening. If you look at that red, it's age-related diseases. Many people are living in such a way that they get age-related diseases prematurely, and they cut their lives short in terms of their usefulness. We want to increase our health span. I love this verse from 1 Corinthians. Run in such a way that you may obtain it. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. I know Google can be dangerous. Not everything on Google is safe to take as science, but there's a lot of good stuff on Google. If you know how to search, everybody can learn tools that can master their own health. And once you start to know what to look for, you can find the right channel. There's such a lot of information these days on how to optimize your physiology. And I want to encourage you, if you haven't become excited about it, become a student of physiology and learning how to optimize and get the best out of your physiology. That's what it's about. It's an exciting thing to do. So the wonders of the human body, listen to some of these statements. We are God's workmanship. He has prepared as a living habitation for the mind, this living habitation for the mind. It is, sorry, it's a bit far from me, a temple which the Lord himself has fitted for the indwelling of his Holy Spirit. The mind controls the whole man. All our actions, good or bad, have their source in the mind. It is the mind that worships God and allows us to heavenly beings. Yet many spend all their lives without becoming intelligent in regard to the casket, which he calls the casket, which is the human body, that contains this treasure. So what she's saying there is there's no excuse. We can't afford to be indolent and say, I don't want to know about physiology. I don't care about physiology. The health, listen to this one. Since the mind and the soul find expression through the body, both mental and spiritual vigor are in great degree dependent upon physical strength and activity. Whatever promotes physical health promotes the development of a strong mind and a well-balanced character. Sorry, the screen's flashing on and off. I'm not sure why. Without health, no one can as distinctly understand or as completely fulfill his obligations to himself, to his fellow beings, or to his Creator. Isn't that profound? Therefore, the health should be as faithfully guarded as the character. Have you thought of that before? Wow. A knowledge of physiology and hygiene should be the basis of all educational effort. I can't add to that. That's profound. Let me just find this on my phone. It'll be easier, sorry. There we go. Brom, you're a legend. Thank you. We should educate ourselves not only to live in harmony with the laws of health, but to teach others the better way. And many, even of those who profess to believe the special truths for this time, are lamentably ignorant with regard to health and temperance. They need to be educated line upon line, precept upon precept. The subject must be kept fresh before them. This is what we're doing now. We're talking together. We're learning together. The subject must be kept fresh before them. This matter must not be passed over as non-essential. For nearly every family needs to be stirred up in the question, in this question. The conscience must be aroused to the duty of practicing the principles of true reform. Thanks, Brom. So that's the goal. We want to feel useful, we want to get energy, and the nice thing about it is that at every stage of life you find yourself at, there is optimal health at every stage of life. You don't have to, at 65, compete with an 18-year-old. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying you can be a healthy 65-year-old if you make the right choices. And we're trying to increase health span. That's the prize, our frontal lobes. The things that we want to do in terms of health interventions are ultimately going to affect the health of our brain. I like that picture. Exercise is fundamentally powerful for the brain. It releases a substance called brain-derived neurotropic factor, which really helps. It's like fertilizer for the brain. So the goal is health, vitality, increasing the health span, a robust body and brain, and a renewed mind. That's the goal. So what does a brain need to thrive? So these are very important points to understand. If you want your brain to be growing and developing, these are essential environmental influences that have to be in place. The brain hates chronic inflammation. If you're chronically inflamed, your brain is dying. An anti-inflammatory state. We need structural building blocks. We said that 60% of the dry weight of the brain is fat, and we're going to see today why that has implications. So your brain needs healthy fatty acids to build itself structurally. Polyunsaturated fatty acids, omega-3s, phospholipids. Functional building blocks. The brain needs amino acids to build neurotransmitters. As you're thinking, dopamine sits in the frontal lobe mostly, GABA in the temporal lobe, parietal lobe is acetylcholine, and serotonin towards the back of the brain. And those neurotransmitters, many of them are made up from amino acids in the diet. So you need structural building blocks, you need functional building blocks, you need an anti-inflammatory state, you need a stable fuel supply. The brain is very dependent. The brain is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the body. It has a very high energy demand. And so it needs a stable fuel supply. And we're going to look in one of the later lectures, and I want to encourage you to keep coming because we're going to continue learning together. It needs a stable fuel supply, and we're going to look at some of the fuel supplies that it has as an option. But if that fuel supply is up and down, your cognitive function is up and down. If you've got unstable blood sugar control, if you've got an unstable fuel supply, your cognition is affected. Oxygen supply. The brain cells can last 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen before they die. If you have a heart attack and there's no circulation, you've got 4 to 6 minutes to restart the circulation to prevent brain death. Non-toxic state, we're going to look at that today. The brain doesn't deal well with a chronic toxic input. And we're going to look at some of the sources of that today. Water. Think about the quality of the water that you're drinking. Tap water, in many times these days, unfortunately, isn't the best quality water anymore. That's a separate topic. I'm not going to go any more into it, but think about the quality of the water you're drinking. Exercise and stimulation. sleep, rest, regeneration, and repair. I want to introduce a concept called the barrier concept. To understand today's lecture, we need to think about the barrier concept in the body. So, the body has a vested interest in protecting itself from the influences of the external environment. This air is outside of my skin. My skin is therefore a barrier. The mucous membranes lining my nose are protecting me from what's coming in through what I'm breathing. That's a barrier. Inside the tube of life, which is what we're looking at today, hint, hint, that's the sieve through which you live. The tube of life is a barrier. It's controlling passage of the external environment into the inner world, your inner physiology. So at points of interface between the external environment and your inner world, the body has barriers that regulate what gets in and what doesn't. If you want to stay healthy, so I like to highlight key concepts. Like put a key next to it. This is a key concept. Know what your barriers are and look after your barriers. And today's looking at one very, very important barrier. The immune system plays a significant role at these points of interface. So wherever your body, your inner world is interacting with the external environment, the body has a major immune cell defense at that interface. And we're going to look at that at the gut level today. So there's the skin, body membranes, and importantly around the brain, we have anybody know? So we can keep all awake. What's the barrier around the brain? The blood-brain barrier. That's not rocket science, yeah. So around the brain, there's this thing called the blood-brain barrier. And many of you, we're going to look at what's called leaky gut syndrome or intestinal hyperpermeability today. There's a thing called, now gaining prominence, called leaky brain syndrome. And what's happening is the barriers in our bodies are being degraded. And a lot of disease, neurological disease and other, they're now finding is related to the breakdown of barriers inside the body. And the brain is this protective barrier which is formed by the blood vessel lining itself called the blood-brain barrier, which we're going to look at. When your gut barrier is upset, your blood-brain barrier is upset. When your blood-brain barrier is upset, you're on track for diseases like dementia, cognitive decline, poor memory, foggy thinking. So we're looking at how to restore the integrity of our barriers. So I won't go too much into that today, but this is the structure of a normal blood vessel on the right. And if you look at the structure on the left, that's a cross-section through the components of the blood-brain barrier in the microvasculature of the brain. So as you can appreciate, the brain can't just say, listen, it's a free-for-all, come inside, whatever you are. It's got to control the passage of substances coming in and out. And it does that through a healthy blood-brain barrier. And so you'll see the blood vessels there. This won't show on the screen, but the blood vessels on the right have got very tight endothelial cell connections. There are things called tight junctions. Tight junctions hold the endothelial cells, the blood vessel lining, together so that the passage of substances is well controlled and regulated. And a lot of the diseases of the brain, a lot of how your brain is functioning and feeling are now found to be related to breakdown in the blood-brain barrier. As you can appreciate, if you're getting rubbish moving into your brain, what's your brain going to be like? It's not going to work very well. That's another picture of it there. So you'll see there's several components. There's a neuron, there's an astrocyte, there's a pericyte. So there's a number of cells that surround the blood vessel in the brain to control this passage in and out of the brain. Just so you believe me, prevalence of dementia continues to increase because of the aging population and limited treatment options. Cerebral small vessel disease and Alzheimer's disease are the two most common causes of dementia, with vascular dysfunction being a large component of both of the pathophysiologies. The neurogliovascular unit, that's that unit I showed you, in particular the blood-brain barrier, is required for maintaining brain homeostasis. A complex interaction exists between the endothelial cells which line the blood vessels and the pericytes. So these endothelial cells are in constant communication with those cells surrounding them, and they together make this unit that's controlling what gets in and what stays out when it's intact. Disruption of the blood-brain barrier in dementia precipitates cognitive decline. This review highlights how dysfunction of the endothelial-pericyte crosstalk contributes to dementia and focuses on cerebral small vessel disease and Alzheimer's disease. It also examines loss of pericyte coverage and subsequent downstream changes. Furthermore, examines how disruption of the intimate crosstalk between endothelial cells and pericytes leads to alterations in cerebral blood flow, transcription, neuroinflammation, and transcytosis, contributing to breakdown of the blood-brain barrier. Finally, this review illustrates how accumulation or loss of endothelial pericyte crosstalk is a major driving force in dementia pathology. A mouthful, but this is what this review is looking at. It's saying, listen, look after your blood-brain barrier, because if you don't, this is what you're at risk of. That's just another picture of it. So those are some diseases that have been potentially linked to dysfunction of the blood-brain barrier. And you can see there's a whole lot. But basically, if your blood-brain barrier is broken down, if it's not working effectively, if it's not protecting your brain, you're at risk of chronic neuroinflammation and dementia, cognitive decline, foggy thinking, not functioning well. So the barrier concept, okay, it's too verbose, we'll leave that one. But a leaky brain. We're going to talk about gluten today a little bit, which is a difficult topic for most of us to talk about, but an important one. Dysbiosis, zonulin activation, opens tight junctions and leaky gut. So this is now looking at how a leaky gut, which we're going to look at, can affect a leaky brain. Opens tight junctions in the gut. This allows unbalanced immune responses, inflammation to impact area. So zonulin's this protein in the gut that controls the permeability of the gut lining. And once that zonulin's activated, it can disrupt the blood-brain barrier as well. So what is the sieve through which we live? By now you'll know it's the gastrointestinal tract. I'm going to park here for a second. If you want to focus on an area of your body that has probably a more widespread influence on your physiology than any other, this is the place to focus. The gut is of paramount importance in your health. And it's not me saying that. You'll see that science and the spirit of prophecy says that all disease begins in the gut, said Hippocrates. That was many, many years ago. In the book called The Health Reformer, the stomach has a controlling power upon the health of the entire body. The benefit you derive from your food, listen to this, does not depend so much on the quantity eaten as on its thorough, what? Digestion. Nor the gratification of the taste so much on the amount of food swallowed as on the length of time it remains in the mouth. All of us struggle to chew enough, don't we? We all know we're supposed to chew till it's a fine pulp, but how many of us do that? One of the worst things we can do, and I'm speaking to me as well, is to eat in a rush. If you can't eat quietly, calmly, chewing slowly, skip till the next meal. That's the best counsel. Because eating food that's improperly digested is damaging to your body. It's damaging to your body, and we'll see why. So those who are excited, anxious, or in a hurry cannot supply the necessary gastric juice. You know why that's the case? Your body has the autonomic nervous system is the automatic nervous system that controls your functions. If I just had some lunch an hour and a half ago, I'm not just sitting thinking stomach acid, now you must produce hydrochloric acid. Okay, the next thing, okay, liver, it's your turn to produce some bile. I don't have to do that because of my autonomic nervous system. And the system that controls digestion is the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's called the rest and digest system. So if you're in an excited sympathetic state, you can't produce the secretions needed to digest your food. And in fact, blood is diverted away from the gut when you're stressed and busy with something else you can't digest. Through mastication, the thorough mastication is a benefit both to the teeth and to the stomach. You're a nervous dyspeptic. The brain is closely connected with the stomach, and its power has so often been called to aid the weakened digestive organs that it is in turn weakened, depressed, and congested. Immediately after eating, you know, most of us have overeaten, isn't it? Immediately after eating, there's a strong draft upon the nervous energy. The brain force is called into active exercise to assist the stomach. Therefore, when the mind or body is taxed heavily after eating, the process of digestion is hindered. The vitality of the system which is needed to carry on the work in one direction is called away and set to work in another. And then that last paragraph is about what we know but don't do. When we go to bed, we shouldn't be having to digest this massive meal. Your stomach needs rest, time to regenerate and repair when you sleep. So you need at least 4-5 hours since your last meal before you go to bed, ideally more. So let's take a trip down your inner tube of life. So your gastrointestinal tract can be seen as your inner tube of life. Quick reminder of some of the anatomy. Digestion begins in the mouth. So chewing repeatedly till it's a fine mulch before you swallow, not drinking copious amounts of fluids with your meal so that you don't weaken your digestive enzyme capacity. Those salivary glands, there's 3 sets. There's parotids over here, submandibular here, and sublingual under your tongue. And obviously, if you've had enough water to drink between meals, you can produce a decent amount of saliva, and digestion, especially carbohydrate digestion, begins in the mouth. So chew well. Make sure that your food is properly masticated before you swallow. Goes down there. At the back of the nose, the pharynx is divided into 3 regions, the back of the throat. The nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx at the bottom. And the tube, once you swallow, gets sent into the esophagus. You'll see the epiglottis there, that's covering your larynx, your vocal cords. When you swallow, the epiglottis flops down over your vocal cords to keep you from aspirating your food. So that's the top part of the anatomy, then goes down the esophagus into the stomach. The stomach is an amazing organ. Its principal function is to secrete hydrochloric acid from the cells lining the mucosa. And the hydrochloric acid is responsible for starting protein digestion. So carbohydrate digestion begins in your mouth with salivary amylase and ptyalin, and protein digestion begins in the stomach. Things that can go wrong in the stomach, you can get ulcers, you can get H. pylori. Anybody heard of H. pylori? Helicobacter pylori can cause ulcers and dyspeptic symptoms, burning after you eat, bloating, reflux. Then it goes into the small intestine. The small intestine is about 7 meters long, about 22 feet, and has the surface area of about the size of a tennis court. So it's an incredible surface area. So the structure of an organ is related to its function. The function of the small intestine is what? So we've started digestion. So it's to finish digestion and to assimilate or absorb. So if you want something to absorb a massive amount of nutrients, you need a large surface area. And the way that God did that is he put everything with folds. There's so many folds, you've got a massive surface area in a small space. So that's incredible. Surface area of a tennis court inside your small intestine alone. So that's what it looks like. It's called the brush border. That's a schematic of the small intestine. It's got all these projections which collectively increase the surface area significantly for absorption. So the small intestine is designed for absorption. And here's where the mischief starts. This, friends, is the sieve through which you live. This mucosal barrier is one of the first and most important barriers that controls the interface of substances from the external environment coming into the body. And it's got a difficult function because it's supposed to be a barrier. It's supposed to not let certain things come in, but at the same time, it's supposed to let good things come in. So it's got to keep things out and let things in. And this mucosal barrier is comprised of 4 main components. There's a bacterial component, so that's your microbiome, the good bacteria that live inside your gut. It's got a mucin layer, which is a mucus layer that's also protective, forms part of the barrier. It's got a single cell epithelial layer, and then it's got an immune cell layer. So there's 4 components to the small intestinal mucosal barrier. Point being, between me and my outside world, there's 1 cell layer thick. There's only 1 cell, because it's got to let good stuff in and keep bad stuff out, but it's 1 cell thick. When it works fine, you're in health. When it doesn't work fine, you're in trouble, because it's letting stuff in that shouldn't be getting in, and we're going to see how that happens. So that's the close-up of the mucosal barrier. That's the epithelium lining the small intestine. And you'll see those little cells in between those white-shaped, white-colored cells. Those are goblet cells. The goblet cells secrete this mucin or mucus so that the food can come down in a smooth way and not get stuck. And those are the Peyer's patches. Those are basically the tonsils of the small intestine. You know, we all have tonsils and adenoids. They protect the upper respiratory tract from things coming into the system that we breathe. These Peyer's patches are the immune cells lining the small intestine that control passage and entry of substances into the system. So this is just a schematic diagram showing what can go wrong with this barrier. So you'll see here, these cells are held together, like if you link elbows, those are called tight junctions. The cells lining your small intestine are called enterocytes. And they link up to each other like an elbow to elbow, and those are called tight junctions. And they tightly control which things can get across and which things stay out in health. So there's two ways substances can get from what I've taken in my food into my body. You all understand how the inside lining of the gut is still outside the body, right? It's like having a big hollow tube going down the middle of you. The inside of that tube is still outside of the body. It's only when it crosses the inner lining does it get inside the body. And so the way that things get inside, they either go through the cell, which is called the transcellular route, or they go between the cells, and that's called the paracellular route. And paracellular transfer is limited by these tight junctions. So in health, the enterocytes, the cells lining the gut, are tightly holding together. The problem happens is when that barrier breaks down. That's when things are now getting into the circulation. And remember, this gut is highly vascular because it's designed to absorb nutrients. That's why it's the sieve through which you live. It is designed to absorb the nutrients that you just had at potluck and get them into your blood to go to the most important organ, one of them, this one we're going to talk about. And so if that barrier is not intact, you're going to get this barrage of stuff coming through when you eat. That sounds dangerous, doesn't it? And it is. So sometimes it's not what you add, but what you remove that allows healing. That's a profound statement. So, we live in a very supplement-focused world and medication-focused world, and supplementation science is fascinating, and there's a place for it. But sometimes you have to take something away to allow healing. That's an important concept. It's not just what pill you take, but sometimes what you remove that can allow healing. Gut inflammation, toxicity, and congestion. Need to identify and address root causes. So the question is, what state is your digestive system in today? Are you in a position to receive and benefit from the nutrients you take in? Food is supposed to be something that energizes us. If we habitually feel, now, don't get confused, you can feel a bit drowsy after you've eaten because your stomach is, your body's diverting blood for digestion. So that's part of the process. But if you've got excessive fatigue, cognitive dysfunction, foggy thinking after you eat, there's something wrong. Either in the type of food you're putting in or how you're processing it. So that's important to bear in mind, is keep a tab on how you feel after you eat. So this concept is very important, the microbiome. They now teach that we have more bacterial cells, bacterial DNA in and on our body than we are human. We've got more bacterial cells in and on us than we are human. So this is an interesting fact. It is estimated that for a 70-kilogram man, there are around 40 trillion bacterial cells and only 30 trillion human cells. So you're more bacterial than you are human in terms of what's in and on you. The study found that those who had obesity had different gut bacteria. Now we can start to blame the bugs, eh? Are you still with me? Had different gut bacteria than their twins without obesity. In particular, obesity was associated with lower gut bacterial diversity, meaning that there were fewer types of bacteria in the gut. Live fermented foods such as kimchi, kefir, and sauerkraut are important to include in your diet. Could it be the bugs? Some studies have shown that if the gut bacteria from people with obesity are put into mice, the mice gain weight. So it's not all the bugs, but the type of bugs you have in your gut can affect how you gain weight and whether you can get in shape. A recent study found that the ratio of two types of bacteria in your intestines may determine how much weight you lose when given a particular diet. These are Prevotella and Bacteroidetes. Those people that had more Prevotella, notice that Prevotella is prevalent in people that have a high fiber, whole grain diet. They had more Prevotella and they lost 2.3 kilograms more body fat than those with the other type of species. Right. Important. This is now where I want to park for quite a while. The liver. So this, if you haven't hugged or loved your liver recently, just rub your right upper quadrant and say, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful. Because this thing, if your liver is healthy, you're on the road to abundant health. If your liver is not healthy, you're in trouble. And it's a spectrum. The thing people don't understand is that health is not a yes or no. It's a continuum. So you can have a liver that's fantastically healthy, or you can have a liver that's struggling a little bit, or you can have a liver that's really not working well at all. And it's a continuum, and that's important to understand. If you want vibrant energy, health, life, vitality, clear mind, love your liver. And we're going to see why now. So the liver is said to have more than about 800 different functions. You haven't thought about what your liver does for you recently, have you? 800 different functions. This says 500, but I've read 800. This is where it sits. So it sits under the right upper quadrant over here with your gallbladder, and sits in relation to the stomach. It receives quite a complicated blood supply, which we're going to look at just for understanding's sake. But in terms of how your gut is supplied with blood, there's three main arteries. There's the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric, and the inferior mesenteric artery. These supply arterial or oxygenated blood to your gastrointestinal tract. So the gut has to receive oxygenated blood just like any other cell in the body. But then the blood that comes from the gut cannot be allowed to just go back into the circulation. It goes via the liver. The liver's the great, what we call, I'll get to it now. So, yeah, that's fine. This is what's called a hepatic portal lobule. So every organ, if you cut it up and study it under the microscope, has got a functional unit. The functional unit of the liver is the hepatic lobule. And it consists of a number of liver cells which form these things called sinusoids. And it's like a coffee percolator. So what's happening is the meal that you had, not immediately but down the line, is being processed stomach, duodenum, small intestine, nutrients are being absorbed, and those nutrients go back via the portal vein to the liver. As you can appreciate, you can't just say everything that's come from my meal is safe, so it has to go through the sentinel. The liver is what we call the sentinel of the body. It's controlling access from your gastrointestinal tract. So what it does is that portal, let me just go back to that picture. You see this blue vein at the bottom there called the portal vein. That portal vein's taking all the nutrients that are coming from the gut and sending it through to the liver. So the liver can process what's coming from your gastrointestinal system. That portal vein divides into a whole bunch of little branches, and they form a hexagon around this hepatic lobule, how the cells are arranged anatomically inside the liver. They pour the blood through these little sinusoids around the hepatocytes. And those hepatocytes are controlling and processing, metabolizing what's come through from the gut. There are immune cells in the liver called Kupffer cells, which are phagocytosing things that don't belong there. They're part of the liver immune system. But it's like a coffee percolator. This blood is pouring through this percolator, and as it's pouring through the percolator, it's being changed, detoxified, clarified, processed, metabolized, so that the liver can send clean, acceptable nutrients back into the circulation. Isn't that amazing? That's what's happening in your liver. And it sends it back via the hepatic vein. So portal vein brings it into the liver, and it drains into that central vein and comes out via the hepatic vein. Bile is essential for fat digestion. So bile is made in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and released when you eat under the influence of hormones to help you digest fat. Fat-soluble vitamins are vitamins A, D, E, and K. You can't absorb fat-soluble vitamins if you don't have enough bile. And a lot of people are having what's called cholestasis. They're having sluggish bile production because of a congested liver. And so many people are battling to absorb fat and battling to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. So detoxification. This is critical to understand. So if your liver, and I really want you to understand today that it's not a black and white, it's a continuum. You might find yourself on one or other part of this continuum. But I'm trying to help you understand the process that goes through when you have a meal and why you might feel like you do. The liver has got to detoxify what comes inside of it. And it does this via two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 1, so there's water-soluble toxins and there's fat-soluble toxins. In phase 1, some of these chemical compounds are metabolized to an intermediate phase, which is actually more toxic than the primary parent compound. A classical example is paracetamol. If you take paracetamol paracetamol is processed to a more toxic intermediate in phase 1 detoxification, which then has to be handled by what's called phase 2 reactions to make it less toxic and excrete it into the bile or excrete it into the plasma where it can be urinated out, essentially. So the body removes toxins either via water or via fat. And the liver is using a multiple set of chemical reactions to process these harmful substances. So can you appreciate, with all that technical jargon, if your liver's not working well, what's going to happen? So that liver, a healthy liver removes 80% plus of all the toxins that are coming through it from the gut. If it's not healthy, those toxins are going to get through. Can you see that? They're going to bypass the liver. And where are fat-soluble toxins going to go if they're not removed by the liver? The brain. That's one of the places. Why? Because the brain is 60% fat. So it's not only to the brain. The rest of your fat will also be a reservoir. But the point is, can you see your brain is vulnerable when your liver is affected? Can you see that? That's really important. So these are some of the nutrients that can help phase 1 and phase 2 reactions. Vitamins B2, B3, B6, B12, folic acid, glutathione. If you want to keep your liver healthy, you want to make sure your glutathione levels are high. Glutathione is the body's master detoxifier. Glutathione is found in every single cell, but the liver uses glutathione to conjugate these very toxic substances and remove them from the body. And these are some of the nutrients: sulfur-containing amino acids, garlic, onion, cruciferous vegetables. These things help your body produce the sulfur compounds that help you detoxify. So that's the sentinel in Hart Bay. And I like to think of the liver as the great sentinel. And I want to just remind you, if you're not loving your liver, you need to love your liver, because your liver has to love you back. And it's performing 800 different functions plus to keep you healthy, or trying to. Processes your hormones. PMS, let's talk honestly. Hormonal disruption issues. A lot of the function or dysfunction is happening because the liver's not metabolizing hormones like it should. So if ladies have, not just ladies, men as well, if they're not metabolizing hormones adequately because of a poorly functioning liver, they can have hormonal symptoms from that as well. So leaky gut syndrome, like I said, is when this barrier is upset, you're going to get a massive onslaught of things coming through the gut which shouldn't be getting through. I like this picture. It's an old battle scene. In the wars, they used to use these trebuchets. You know what trebuchets are? And they used to use trebuchets to throw rocks at the walls and create holes in the barriers. And that's what's happening, is that when you've become sensitized to something that you're taking in your diet, like gluten or egg, whatever it is that you might become sensitized to, you're essentially getting holes in your small intestine. And that's causing intestinal hyperpermeability, and that's putting your body and liver under strain. Part of the problem is that all the bacteria in the gut, some of them contain this, some of the gram-negative bacteria particularly, they contain this coating called a lipopolysaccharide coating. And this lipopolysaccharide-laden bacteria enters the circulation through this leaky gut syndrome, and it causes this massive inflammatory response. And let me tell you something, most people are battling today with chronic inflammation. And a lot of that chronic inflammation is coming from the gut. And so this is part of the inciting stimulus for chronic inflammation, is lipopolysaccharide endotoxemia. Things that were never designed to get into our bodies are getting into our bodies. And this is causing a massive immune response. So this load is now coming through the liver. The liver's got a finite number of substances with which to process these toxins. It's just not inexhaustible. That gets overwhelmed. The liver gets congested, inflamed, doesn't process these things properly, gets tight and congested, doesn't make enough bile, you stop digesting, etc., etc. And then the last slide up, a little block there, I said the effect of SNPs. So most of us, none of us have come through to this stage of Earth's history without some genetic deletions. So you can have the most optimal diet, but you can still have genetic variations that affect how your body processes certain toxins. So one of these SNPs is called glutathione S transferases. So A SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism. It's a little single point mutation in your genetic code that affects how an enzyme works or doesn't work. And some of these detoxification pathways have genetic mutations in them that if you understand it, and you can check for individual patients, if you understand it, you can see which patients are at risk of certain types of cancers, etc. So when you'll see there's a massive trend now to testing people's genetics. You can work out what genetic mutations you have, what your vulnerabilities are, but you can literally predict which environments are going to place that patient at risk of certain types of cancers based on their genes. And some of these genes are affecting your detoxification pathways by how you process certain things. So a clogged fatty liver means ineffective detoxification and poor health. A vibrant liver means powerful detoxification and super health. Again, we're talking about brain health, body health. We're not talking primarily about the liver, but this is an essential. So some of the symptoms of liver congestion. Now this is where everybody takes a note and says, I have that. Look at these. No appetite, okay, circles under the eyes, loss of focus, PMS, estrogen dominance, low free T3, that's the thyroid hormone, sudden allergies, bloodshot eyes, chronic fatigue, hormonal imbalances, itchy skin, constipation, chemical sensitivities, disrupted sleep, acne, outbursts of emotion. They're fairly nondescript, but what I'm saying is if your liver's not so I'll give you a classical example. In a chronic alcoholic, someone that's damaged their liver to cause enough to cause cirrhosis. What's happening there is this stuff that's coming from the gut that's supposed to be removed via the liver is now passing straight into the circulation, and it's causing what's called hepatic encephalopathy. Has anybody heard of hepatic encephalopathy? So basically, this barrage of amino acids and toxins are just flooding into the brain. And these patients with end-stage cirrhosis get this confusion, and their cognitive function gets dramatically affected. And what I'm trying to say is there's a continuum of that. You don't have to be an end-stage cirrhotic patient to get that effect if your liver's not working properly. Before we finish up, so what practically are some of the things that we can do to help us, do you think? If a disrupted barrier, an overloaded detoxification system, chronic inflammation, or some of the problems that we're having, what can we do you think? Sorry? Fasting. Practical things. We can fast. Fasting is one of the most anti-inflammatory things you can do. Constantly eating, especially eating things that you've become reactive to, is a chronic inflammatory stimulus. So fasting, what else? Liver cleanse. So there are various liver cleanses out there on the internet. I think, and there's certainly a place for them. I'm a proponent, and actually, I think as a church we should have a fasting weekend, a juicing weekend. You know, like get together in groups and have some green juices together, cleanse out the liver, settle the inflammation. So you can fast, you can green juice, you can exercise, you can sweat. Sweating removes toxins. How many of us go through life without never breaking a sweat? And it's to our detriment, because sweating is one of the elimination routes of the body. So part of the answer to the question is we need to potentiate all of the elimination routes of the body. The body eliminates via the gut, via the urine, via sweat. So it's got a certain finite number of elimination routes, and you need to potentiate those. So signs you might need a liver cleanse: bloating, puffiness, gas, reflux or constipation, sugar and carb cravings. Anybody have those? Have you noticed, I don't know about you, but when I start the day, I'm so ready to go, let's do it. I start out with some nice water, clean, lemon in it. Get to the end of the day where you felt like there's been a plunger on your forehead the whole day, and you come home, you don't feel like eating broccoli, do you? You notice you feel like eating Oreos and crisps and all that rubbish. And it's a state of what's happened in your physiology during the course that no matter how determined you are, you just feel like eating rubbish. And that's part of the disarray, the inflammation, the things that affected your neurotransmitters make you crave things that you actually we shouldn't be eating. So don't give in. There's physiology behind your cravings. Trouble with weight gain. This is an important one. If you are struggling to lose weight, it's not fair to say to people that are overweight, just eat less. Friends, I want to tell you it's not that simple. It is harder, and these are some of the reasons it's harder. If you've got gut issues and you're chronically inflamed, your metabolism's upset, your insulin resistance is entrenched. There are a number of things you have to do simultaneously to get on top of the weight. Weight loss can be a very challenging issue for many people. And it's not just because they're being piggish and overeating all the time. There's many things that underlie it. And the tendency, especially with us, those of us, and I'm not one of them, that are blessed with a physiology that can eat anything and stay looking like a grasshopper, that's not me. I don't have that physiology, but some people do. And the tendency is those kind of people look at those that are overweight and think, yes, if you could just get better, more self-control, really? No, really, come on. Don't be such a piggy, And it's not that simple. And we're going to talk about weight control. But what I want to get through today is that an essential component of this weight struggle is happening in the gut. Because this chronic inflammation is upsetting your hormonal axis. It's entrenching insulin resistance. Chronic inflammation begets more insulin resistance, which makes you more inflamed, which makes you more insulin resistance, which makes you more fat. So you have to understand the multiplicity of factors that are affecting your weight and confront as many of those as possible to be successful in weight loss. But it is possible, but it's not always simple. So that's important to understand. Tired and sluggish, brain fog, mood swings, hormonal imbalance, poor sleep, seasonal allergies and food sensitivities. I'm not trying to make you neurotic today. I'm trying to make you understand we live in a very challenging world. We live in a world that's challenging our physiology in ways that we weren't designed to be challenged. And the system has had to rise to a challenge that it's not designed for. We won't talk about beta-glucuronidase today. Gluten in your gut, be careful. Some people say, I will eat my gluten no matter what. And if you're one of those blessed to not be affected by gluten, fantastic. But I want to tell you that most people these days are. For most people, because of what man has done to gluten, they are generating a chronic inflammatory response at the gut level from gluten. If you have brain symptoms, if you have fatigue, brain fog, battling to get energy, battling to lose weight, try a gluten-free diet for 6 weeks. And it's not easy. Consider how much of what we eat. Now, I'm not saying gluten is evil. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying for many people, gluten has become pro-inflammatory, and it's causing gut issues. And part of the reason for that is wheat was hybridized quite a while back. They changed the genetic structure of wheat. Wayne might be able to add to that, I'm not sure. But so they also added a thing called glyphosate. Anybody heard of glyphosate? So glyphosate is Roundup, which is a thing they use in the wheat process. It's a desiccant. And glyphosate has been shown scientifically to directly cause leaky gut syndrome. And there's a graph that shows the incidence of neurological degenerative conditions like autism, the autism spectrum disorders, dementias. These things all increased in proportion to the use of glyphosate. So sometimes it wasn't necessarily the gluten, but the glyphosate that came with the gluten that was damaging our guts. So the take-home message there is try and look, most of us have financial constraints that we live under, including myself. But try and find fresh, raw, farm produce, unsprayed stuff. Try and eat whole foods that are homegrown. We've got a facility to use our homegrown produce. So do that. These things make a difference. So we used to think that maintaining a healthy weight was a simple question. If you needed to lose weight, eat less and exercise more. These days, however, we know that it's way more complicated than that. And we haven't even spoken about hormones yet. We're talking about inflammation here. Wait till we talk about hormones. In fact, there are almost endless factors affecting our ability to lose weight, including underlying health conditions, food allergies, chronic stress, and gut microbiome issues, just to name a few. All these barriers to weight loss have been one thing in common: they produce chronic inflammation in the body. Food allergies, such as those to dairy or gluten, common triggers for the inflammatory response. If you don't address underlying food sensitivities and allergies, it will be close to impossible to maintain a healthy weight. So what the take-home of that is, see how you feel after a meal. Just let your body's symptoms talk to you. If you recognize something's not working for you, there are ways of testing whether it is indeed problematic. But the point is, pay attention to your physiology. If something's So remember old Daniel Amen we spoke about in the first talk? He says, the question he asks is, will it love me back? Does it love you back? You might love chocolate cake. Who doesn't love chocolate cake? Does it love you back? You might love white bread rolls with whatever. Does it love you back? Does it love you back? One study showed that 54% of overweight and 47% of obese individuals lost weight on a gluten-free diet. Profound. Worth a try. So in addition to weight loss resistance, inflammation can manifest in symptoms that affect all areas of your body. Moodiness, fatigue, brain fog, depression, anxiety, gut problems, bloating, constipation, gas, IBS, blood sugar imbalances, metabolic dysfunction. Practical take-home messages. These are things we must try and do. Eat whole food, unprocessed, plant-based, allergen-low diet that's nutrient-dense. Pay attention to how you're feeling, like I said, after eating. Testing is available. So we live in an incredible scientific age. You cannot believe what testing is available to assess your physiology these days. It is mind-blowing. You can assess the type of bugs living in your gut. You can assess the balance of them. You can assess whether you've got leaky gut syndrome. You can assess, and these things, you can assess what SNPs you have. You can extrapolate how your liver's working. Profound. So there's a thing called a GI map test. If you're having, this is not for everybody. If you're having excessive gut issues, there's something called a GI map test which one can look at doing. Rest, remove, repair, replace is how you repair your digestive system. Manage your microbiome. Kimchi, kefir, and sauerkraut are good things to include in the diet. I know the Germans are very good at eating sauerkraut. I must say it's an acquired taste, but I think we need to practice eating sauerkraut. Manage your microbiome. Avoid refined sugars. Let me just say, refined sugar is bad for everybody. Whether you're blessed with genes that you can metabolize like a Ferrari at any age, or not, refined sugar is bad for everybody. Love your liver. So tonight, instead of having, Steer's veggie burger and fries, which is often a nice Saturday night meal, maybe a nice green smoothie. For a starter, start with that. Start with spinach, some celery. Elise, any other ideas? Spinach, celery, carrots, beets, beetroot. Pizza. Ah. So, sounds good. Sounds good. But they said the average pizza contains about, I think they said 3,000 calories, wasn't it? Now, if you think about the average calorie requirement for a male or female, it's in the 2,000s, 2,200 for an average male is what you need for a day. So one pizza that's out there is about 3,000 calories. So if you eat a pizza tonight and you're not cycling tomorrow, And then eat garlic, onions, and cruciferous veg, plus. Use garlic, onions, cruciferous veg. What's cruciferous veg? Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, sauerkraut. But those things contain sulfur-containing amino acids, sulfur-containing compounds that help your liver to clean out. That's the point. Fasting and juicing. So pay attention to your digestion. It is your lifeline and the lifeline to your body and brain. Thank you. Our next appointment is at 4:30, so I don't know if anybody has any questions or topics they want to discuss and share. We can have a small session for questions and input if you'd like. If there's no questions, that's fine. I'm happy. Anybody have any questions? Dr. Ficker. Absolutely. Sure, exactly. So those of you that, and this is what I want to encourage you to do. I mean, this is a passion of mine, as you can hear. I read, whenever I get a chance, I read something other than what I'm studying at university. This stuff is my passion. Study your physiology, becoming passionate about optimizing your own health, because there's so much information out there. If you do that, you'll see a very common topic these days is fasting. Fasting is a very, very powerful healing modality. So, benefits of fasting, it allows your body time to not have to process. It allows your body, now the benefits of fasting start at certain time periods or duration of the fast. So there's a 12-hour fast, 24, 36, etc. And there's various things that are happening physiologically at different time intervals along a fast. You've got enough glycogen in your liver and in your muscles to last about 12 to 24 hours, roughly. So that means that when you stop eating, and if you've had a carbohydrate-rich meal, that carbohydrate has been stored as glycogen in your liver and in your muscles. And for the first few hours, when you're fasting, you're not burning fat, you're burning glycogen. And so you've got to get through your glycogen reserves before you start to burn fat. So that's the first thing. Not that burning fat is the only objective for fasting, but what fasting does is it also allows the cells to start doing what's called autophagy at a certain phase. So cells develop a lot of insults and injuries through metabolism. And fasting allows those cells to apoptose that are damaged and to build new ones. So to answer your question, most of us are very busy during the week. And it's hard to fast. Look, fasting needs to become a lifestyle. So a good start is to make sure you commit. Most of us are not laborers here. Some of us might be. I do not expend the same amount of calories as someone who's swinging a pick, digging a hole all day long. It's not fair, as much as I might like to. It's not realistic for me to think I can go eat 2 pizzas tonight, and I can just sit at my desk and study all day tomorrow, and I'm going to be fine metabolically. That's not realistic. I have to say, what are my needs? And most of us are sedentary enough to benefit from 2 meals a day. That's the first thing, 2 meals a day. Most of us do not need 3 meals a day. Remember that every time you eat, you are, especially if it's a carbohydrate-containing meal and certain types of carbs. Now, carbs are not evil. We're going to talk about carbs down the line. But you are spiking your insulin. You're increasing your insulin every time you eat. And every time you increase insulin, you're switching off fat metabolism. Most of us have plenty of fat to use, but we can't access it because our insulin is high. And so for as long as insulin switches off fat burning, for as long as your insulin is high, you will never burn fat. One of the things that fasting does is it drops your insulin. But you've got to fast for a prolonged period. Most of us have been so used to living on carbs only. Now, carbs are not bad. I'm not saying carbs are bad, but I'm qualifying what I'm saying. Most of us are so used to metabolizing carbohydrate only that when we don't have carbohydrate, we feel like someone's cut our throat. And we can't actually burn fat because our body's so used to burning carbs that, we're thinking like, when's the next meal? And that's a poor sign. A good sign of blood sugar balance is that you're not running out of fuel 2 hours before your next meal. But to answer your question, I think a weekend is a good place to start fasting as a church family. I think if you've got the whole weekend off, if you have a Friday breakfast, do your Friday work, and then you can start with water the first 12 to 24 hours, and then juice fast some stage during that as well. So add some green juices in, some carrot juice, so not too much carrot. So in terms of vegetables, certain veg are higher in sugar than others. Beetroot and carrots are very good for detoxification, but they're higher in sugar content. Remember, when you take the fiber out of a vegetable, its effect on your glycemic control is very, very different. God didn't design us to eat 10 carrots in one meal. So we juice 10 carrots and we drink the juice. Can you see the effect of that? It comes with the fiber. So be aware that certain vegetables are higher in sugar content than others, which is not intrinsically a major problem, but you need to consider the impact on your blood sugar. So water fasting for 12 to 24 hours, green juice fasting, and obviously, if you've got other medical conditions, you need to monitor some of your parameters during it as well. But resting, making sure that you're not eating before you go to bed, those are some of the tips I would say. And committing to a 2-meal regimen. So if you push your breakfast to 9, 10 o'clock, and your supper to your next meal 5, 6 hours later, You've got your 2 meals in. You don't need more than that. And those 2 meals must be balanced.
Bruce, also if you eat fruit at night, you have your main other meals, breakfast, lunches. You can just have some fruit that's much lighter.
Yes. Now you can.
You say you can not even eat, have some water.
Exactly. Exactly. So some people that are having problems with too much insulin, if they eat just fruit, can sometimes struggle with their blood sugar control. It's not because fruit is a problem, it's because of what their insulin's doing. Because some fruits are metabolized very quickly, like banana has a lot of sugar in it, compared to berries, which are also fruit, they have a lower sugar content. So not all fruits are equal in terms of their impact on blood sugar. But if you can go to bed with a really empty stomach and fasting for 6 hours plus before bed, you're giving your system a chance to heal and rest. Any other questions? Pastor Don.
Do you think you have a leaky gut? Where do you start?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good question. So if you have repeat the question. So the question is, if you think you have leaky gut, what are some of the places to start? So just to answer that question. So if you've got a leaky gut, and it's called intestinal hyperpermeability, you've got to say, what is the cause in me? What's a likely cause? Am I getting a lot of bloating and discomfort? Is it a maldigestion problem? Is it a wrong bug type of problem, dysbiosis? So identify and treat the bad bugs that might be in your system. So that's one thing. So if you've been, for instance, some people, to give you an example, some people will travel and they'll come back and they'll start having intestinal problems. They'll start having bloating. And without realizing it, they've picked up a parasite somewhere that's sitting in the gut that needs to be identified and eliminated. So if you're having bloating and maldigestion symptoms and it's not going away, there's 2 options. You can try an elimination diet. So eliminate common allergens. Gluten. None of us should be doing dairy. I'm sorry to say, cow's milk is for calves. It's not for humans. It's biochemically designed for little cows, to make little cows grow quickly. And when adults keep growing quickly, that's called cancer. So cow's milk is one of the causes, casein is one of the causes of prostate cancer and triggers for breast cancer in certain people. So cow's milk is for little calves. Leave it to the little calves.
Also, you can use a soya milk.
Absolutely.
I don't drink the cow's milk at the old age home. I buy my own soya milk.
Exactly. And now you don't even have to, there's so many milk alternatives now. There's almond milk, oat milk, rice milk. There's so many alternatives. But the point is, I derailed a bit. So we were at Pastor Don, and we were saying, eliminate the common allergens. Cow's milk. You can see that's a hobby horse of mine. I got derailed. But eliminate cow's milk, gluten, sometimes egg for some people. Egg is quite a common allergen. Yeast is quite a common allergen. And then take a digestive enzyme. You can try a digestive enzyme as well. You get plant-based digestive enzymes. And take something like glutamine. Glutamine there's a number of things that repair the gut lining. And L-glutamine is an amino acid that helps the gut lining to repair. Zinc carnosine, deglycerized licorice. There's a whole list of things that I can talk about another time if you want to, that help the gut lining repair. So in principle, the answer to your question is rest, remove, repair, replace. It's the 4R program. So that's what, if you really want to know what's happening in your gut at the expert level, that GI map test, it's not for everybody, for people that have specific gut problems, because it's about 8,000 Rand, because it's a genetic test that looks at all the bugs in your gut. But the principle is identify and remove offending foods and bugs, replace enzymes that might be deficient, and heal the gut lining with gut mucosal repairers like L-glutamine, zinc carnosine, deglyceride licorice. Those are some of the things that an approach to leaky gut syndrome. And once you seal the barrier, remember you can't hope to heal your liver if your gut is still damaged, because you're constantly letting the barrage through. So you really got to start with the gut, optimizing digestion, and then fix your liver. Any further questions?
Bruce, what about the eggs? The spirit of prophecy mentions that there'll come a time when we won't be able to eat the eggs because of the virus in the yellow.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I believe that. Sorry, there was a question. Thanks, Dion. There's a question about eggs. whether they're safe for consumption. So I believe, the spirit of prophecy, that there will come a time when all animal products are best to be avoided. I think if you're still eating eggs, you need to be able to source the best quality eggs you can. I'm not saying you must eat eggs, but I'm saying if you're choosing still to eat eggs, you need to be aware of where your eggs are coming from as far as possible, because not all eggs are created equal. The quality of the egg is related to the quality of the chicken. And so you need to source good quality eggs, yeah. Any other questions? Carol?
Bruce, when you come to green juices and all that, should it just be vegetables or can you mix fruit and vegetables in your drinks?
So,
Toasted vegetables.
exactly. So the answer to that question depends on a few things, on what you... Sorry, the question is... I keep forgetting. The question is, juicing, should you have pure vegetable juices or mix with fruit? When you're eating a whole food, vegetables and fruits have different digestion times, which is why we counsel not to eat them too much together. Juicing does change the quality of the food that you're eating by removing the fiber. If you're worried about affecting your blood sugar balance, if you're trying to lose weight and keep your insulin low, then it doesn't make sense to juice a lot of fruits, because you're going to get a lot of the sugar content without the fiber. I'm not saying it's bad. It's a quantity related and what you're trying to achieve. If you want to cleanse and not affect your blood sugar too much, then exclusive vegetable juicing makes more sense, if that makes sense. So in terms of eating, try and separate them as per the counsel, in terms of their different digestion times. When you're juicing, if you want to add a little bit of lemon or half an apple to your vegetable juice, that's not a big deal. But you've got to think, how do I want to affect my blood sugar now that I've separated the fiber from this food? And what do I principally want to achieve? Remember, fruits are full of antioxidants. Fruits are healthy. God made them healthy. But they're healthiest when they're eaten as they come and not separated and manipulated. So drinking a glass of apple juice or orange juice is not the same as eating an apple, because we want just the sugary taste and we don't want the fiber. The fiber is part of the healing. So, but the point is, if you want to purely detox and not affect your blood sugar, then vegetable juicing is the way to go. Green vegetable juicing. Spinach, kale, celery, with a bit of fresh lemon, some ice blended in, maybe a little bit of apple. Your liver will love that. Absolutely love that. Any further questions?
Then why are we talking about juicing if we can just say it's better to make a smoothie so that we get the fiber and all the other...
Exactly. So the thing... Absolutely. But you can, if you're going to juice spinach and kale, so some vegetables are higher water content than others, you're going to get more, if you juice, you're going to be able to get more nutrients there than you would through a smoothie, because you can't eat 10 carrots, but you could juice 10 carrots and drink them. Not that you should, but you get the point. So if you're going to juice spinach or cucumber, you're going to just get the juice out of that without the fiber. You're going to be able to take a higher quantity of cucumber and spinach than if you put that in a smoothie. It's not a major problem. It's not a big deal. That's the only difference. Yeah.
And one other question is, what about fermented milk?
Fermented milk. So fermented milk is considered more live milk. It's got more bacterial cultures in it. So in a sense, that is better and more digestible. But the problem is dairy products still have a lot of hormones and stuff in them, which we really don't need. Yeah, that's an option. If you can source organic, that's fine. But the bottom line still is, biochemically, cow's milk is designed for calves to digest. We are not calves, and yet we want to subsist on the breast milk of another animal. That's what we want. And it doesn't make sense, because biochemically we're not designed, it's designed for little cows. And it contains many nutrients that actually help little cows grow quickly, like I said. So it's not in our best interest. But to answer your question, it would be healthier to have an organic milk. It would be healthier to have a whole food milk that's cultured and fermented a bit, that's more digestible, more live, but still not biochemically suited for us. Okay, I think we've spoken enough. If there's no more questions, but are you keen? Shall we do this sometime? Like a juice fast or a juice weekend or something like that? We do it. Eh? So go home, love your liver, think about these things, think about how your food affects your digestion. I hope that was helpful. Thank you. Oh, sorry, let's pray. Let's pray before we close. Father in heaven, we want to thank you for the time we had to look at, again, at this incredible creation that you've given us to take care of. Thank you that we live in an era where there's so much information to help us. Help us to learn, to grow, and to do the part that is ours. Help us to be the best we can to live for you and to serve you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.